thank you all so much for having us today. I'm going to ask our panelists to go ahead and make their way to the stage. And while they're coming up, I'm going to do some introductions. So Richard Stevens, who's making his way here, joined Smith Anderson in September 2012 after serving as a senator in the North Carolina General Assembly since 2003. Before stepping down from this role, he was ranked as the Senate's third most effective member, according to a survey by the nonpartisan North Carolina Center for Public Policy Research. For the past 2 years, Richard was co-chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee and served as a budget leader under both Republican and Democratic majorities. An attorney and management consultant, he was manager of Wake County from 1984 to 2000. Before that, Richard served as assistant Wake County manager and held numerous positions with the City of Durham, including director of finance and assistant city manager. And his list of professional and community affiliations is about 2 pages long, so I won't read all of those. Welcome, Richard. Thank you. Joe, just to Richard's right, is filling in for, but not really filling in because he can hold the stage on his own. But David Cook had planned to be with us today, but we thought we were going to be able to conference him in. Tests went pretty well, but at the last minute we decided that it might be just a wee bit risky. So Joe graciously agreed to join us today. So thanks, Joe. Deputy County Manager Joe Durham oversees external departments including environmental services, community services, human services, workforce development, as well as the public safety related department and divisions of emergency medical services, fire rescue, emergency management, and the City County Bureau of Identification. Oh my goodness. During Joe's time, he has served as Deputy County Manager since 2001. Following the retirement of County Manager David Cook in November of 2013, he served as the interim county manager until the appointment of Jim Hartman in April of this year. His previous experience includes 8 years as county manager of Edgecombe County. He's also worked for the City of Rocky Mount, the Wooten Company in Raleigh, the North Carolina Department of Natural Resources and Community Development, the City of Sanford, and Richmond County, North Carolina. He's a graduate of East Carolina University and has also pursued graduate studies at ECU and at UNC Chapel Hill. Welcome, Joe. And I understand you're quite the athlete. Was. Okay. Well, we can put him to the test. Jim, on Joe's right, began his service as the Wake County Manager in April. Previous positions held include County Manager of Seminole County, Florida, Manager of the City of Alexandria, Virginia, and County Administrator for Spartanburg County, South Carolina, and Eagle County, Colorado. He also spent 13 years with Orange County, Florida, after serving 8 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, where I understand you served on a small boat search and rescue crewman, on the Oregon coast, boot camp, naval shipyard firefighting, and paramedic instructor, and that you loved every minute of it. So an interesting background. Jim is married and has 2 children who live in the D.C. area. So welcome, Jim. I'd like to start with a question really to all of you. When you were county manager, or now are county manager, Jim, what were your primary areas of focus? What were the challenges you were facing and the opportunities? So, Senator Stevens, we'll start with you.
Thank you. First, is this on? Is this on?
It is.
Can you hear me fine? First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be back in Garner. I had a chance to represent the Garner area for 10 years in the General Assembly, and as the mayor and council knows, spent a lot of time with you all and a number of your issues, so it's always good to be here. And it's continuing to change. I had never been in this facility before. It's a really fine one. I'm really proud of it. I came a long time ago. I was a kid at the time. I was just 31 when I came to Wake County, and you can do the math and see I'm not a kid anymore. But the county, and some of you, a couple of you were around then, not many, but there were a couple. Most of this room weren't even born yet when I came back to Wake County in 1980, which has been my home county. And it's rare in my profession, my former profession, that you get to come back to your home county, and that was a real pleasure and a real treat to be able to do that. Wake County at the time was in need of a number of things. I'll give you just a few examples. There was no county-wide library system. There were a series of town library systems and a sort of confederation of libraries. There was no county parks program. The county was facing federal lawsuit for jail overcrowding. The schools were crowded. That hasn't changed. The county had a very good credit rating, but it hadn't issued a bond in a number of years. And there was a lot of opportunity. I was thinking on the way over today as you were talking about tweeting, The only automation we had in 1980 was a mainframe computer that was located at Wake Med that the county shared to do payroll and tax billing, and that was it. There were no cell phones, there were no computers, there was no social media. It was all done manually for the most part. A very different era, but what a grand opportunity. In 1980, I'll never forget this, in May that year, we had a meeting to talk about what then was going to be called the Outer Loop, which we now know is 540. It existed as a line on the map at that time, and it's taken 34 years to get it to where it is today and not yet finished. And the planners had some population projections. And the county population in 1980 was just over 300,000. And the planners were projecting that by the year 2000, Wake County would grow by 50%. And the old heads in the room said, oh, that's not possible. You can't get 50% growth in 20 years. Anybody know what it was in 2000, what the actual increase was? It was 100% growth. Wake County population doubled from 1980 to 2000, the time I was with Wake County. Absolutely doubled. Well, that for any community, anywhere, is phenomenal growth. My wife is from Western Pennsylvania. We go back there, we used to when our parents were living there before they passed on, and I never got lost because it never changed. It was the same year after year after year after year. I knew where everything was. I get lost every time I go to Cary, and I live in Cary. Things change so much. So the opportunity was great in Wake County because of the growth potential. Fortunately, there were some visionary folks in elected office and in the business communities back then to think about things like, let's start planning an outer loop 34 years ago. There was a federal program called Federal Revenue Sharing that had come along, and the federal government would cede money to the local governments to make decisions. We had an old county commissioner who was chairman of the board then. He was a sweet potato farmer by profession. And he said, you know what, if the federal government gives you money, they might try to, they're going to take it away at some point. So we better not put it in programs because then we're going to get stuck with those programs when the money goes away. And they might want to come get it back. So let's bury it. So they built water lines to connect Raleigh's system with Garner, with Cary, with the western part of the county, with Zebulon, the eastern part of the county, and Wake Forest. Guess what that did for growth? Absolute brilliant move to create an infrastructure of water and utilities to allow that growth to take place. And Wake County took off. And it was a delight to have to be able to be a part of that, I should say, and have a chance to work with several boards of county commissions who had great vision. We did a bond issue early on, and we put on the ballot the same day 5 different things: schools, Wake Tech, a new jail, parks, and libraries. And they all passed in every precinct of the county except one, and that's the one precinct you can't get to in Wake County unless you go into Franklin County above Falls Lake, and passed with 85% margin of support with no tax increase. And we took off, and we started building a park system, a library system, built a new jail, and started building schools, which were then and now tremendous challenge. And that was the challenge, how to deal with the growth. 20 years in the job, we never stopped trying to deal with the growth. The growth kept coming. We were glad to see it. We watched communities all across this country withering and dying on the vine because they weren't growing. The challenge was to do it right. The challenge was to do it with quality and to keep up with it. But that absolutely was the opportunity, and still is, I would say, when we get to Joe and Jim, I think still the challenge in Wake County today.
Thank you. Joe, same question.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. It's a pleasure to be here today. It's love coming to Garner, and I always find my way around versus going to Cary. So it's always a better place to be in. It's a pleasure to be here today. And when I got the phone call or email from Adrian about subbing or being a substitute for David Cook, I said, yeah, I can do that. Then David called me, and he was giving me information. And you know, one of the good things about this is you can pretty much say whatever you want. You can blame it on somebody else. You can say, I always like those opportunities. So it's a pleasure to be here today. What you'll hear is a recurring theme here of growth and building schools and building libraries and parks, and that continues. Our population, when I came here, and I was born by David back in 2001, David had been county manager, I think, for less than a year. So, you know, one of the things that happens is that you inherit what's given to you by somebody else. So we inherited what Richard gave us, right? More or less. Okay. So we had that, and there's a good infrastructure that was in place. But again, there are recurring themes. Our population back in 2000 was about 628,000. Does anybody know what the population of Wake County is right now? Almost 1 million people. As a matter of fact, we'll do 1 million people on August 22nd. That's our estimate. We'll be at 1 million people. So you look at that growth between 2000 and 2014, that's 60% growth in such a very, very short time period. So a recurring theme of having to manage all the growth and development that happens here in Wake County. People are complaining about not having a place to dump trash, traffic's getting worse, we need more parks, we need more schools. So growth has been a continuous challenge for us. And the schools became a real significant part of that. We continue to build schools, and I remember back in 2003, 4 or so, we were receiving as many as 6,000 to 7,000 new kids every year. And that's about the size of a lot of the average school districts in North Carolina. So we were getting as many people with growth as some of the size of the average school systems are. So significant amount of growth. We had lots of bonds, lots of concerns with relationships between the Board of Education and the Board of Commissioners. That continues, and I always tell people that is set up by the general statutes for us to have a relationship that will differ on what our needs and where our resources should be, and that will continue. And again, that's not nothing that we can't overcome. We've been successful with bond referendums, and it requires a lot of joint planning with the school system. I think we've made a lot of progress in that area, and it's been very successful for us. So that relationship will continue to be challenging, but it is a very, very important and critical relationship for Wake County. A lot of you know what happened back in 2008. We had the recession, and again, that was a significant challenge for us back then. We had to match our resources with the expenditures at that time. We cut back on a capital program. That was one of the most significant challenges for me during my work career. Again, everybody felt the pressure associated with the recession, having to again look at reducing spending. We did that on the operational side as well as our capital budget side. Stopped building as many parks. Stopped doing the open space program. Stopped building libraries. So that was a significant challenge for us. But out of those challenges, there are also great opportunities. And we continued, and again, the growth continues. That's one of the things that's important. Even during that recession, we still had a significant amount of growth to occur in Wake County. So we continue to grow. We continue to work on innovative programs. The Advanced Care Paramedics is a big one. Worked on the Middle Class Express. Wake Watch, again, looking at greater accountability and transparency. And one of the things that's always important for us, and I say that here in Garner and Cary and everywhere else, the partnerships. We continue to create, develop, expand those. With Greater Raleigh Convention Center, the Neuse River Greenway, South Wake Landfill, one of the things that Richard started when he was county manager, so those things continue. And again, growth, growth, growth. We had 7 successful bond referendums, built schools, Wake Tech, libraries, open space, new jail. We keep building jails all the time. We just got to build jails. So jails are always there. And we passed budgets with no tax increase over the last 5 years. No tax increase. When Jim got here, there was a tax increase, and I'll stop with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. You don't even have to ask the question. I mean, I'm kind of a major extrovert, so that was really painful having to listen to them. Just kidding, they're in the same boat. Today I'm celebrating my 4-month anniversary, and I'm really one of these people from elsewhere who chose to move here. And there are a lot of reasons for that, because this is one cool place to be. We've got 12 municipalities that are just great. We've got some beautiful farmland out in the county. We've got great natural resources, and we're soon to have 1 million people. So this growth theme is really important for us. And you're going to hear more about it because it's something that all of us together are going to have to deal with. This is not something that each one of the municipalities handle just on their own. We're going to have to come together collectively and build the strongest partnerships ever to make sure that we maintain the type of the quality of life that everybody's used to. We'll have different neighborhoods, different things in all the various communities. Cary is different than Garner, and that's different than Zebulon, but they're all really neat places. And so now it's going to be our responsibility moving into the future to manage that really well. And we've got a number of things that we've got to do. You've heard a lot of discussion about the schools. Schools are major. Our budget in the county went slightly over $1 billion this year, $1.066 billion, and over 50% of that goes to support education in our community. Some of that is in operating expenses, and some of that is in debt service to pay for the wonderful infrastructure that has been put in place and was put in place by very responsible Board of Commissioners actions and great management. What Richard and David and Joe and others have done over the past 20 years is just remarkable. So when somebody comes knocking at my door saying, hey, take a look at this place, because it's unlike most counties in America, I did, and I chose to move here because I really want to be part of this. This is a great place, and sometimes, and you've heard, I've moved around a little bit, and I've lived in other great places, but this is where I want to end my career because it's a very responsible county government, and so being a part of that and being a partner with all of you is going to be very important.
Thank you. I'm going to stick with you, Jim. Given the fact that you're relatively new and you've come from other communities, how do your experiences from the other communities that you've been in shape sort of your approach to Wake County now, your vision for Wake County now?
Yeah. Well, of course, one's vision grows once you get into it. It's always amazing when I first parachute in someplace and they go, what's your vision? I go, I don't know, I just got here. Fortunately, my vision here included a very detailed list of goals and objectives from the Board of Commissioners, and that was a very responsible thing to do. They did that in February. I got here in March. We're working on many of those items and will continue to do so. I think what I can bring now is observations and experiences from other parts of the country. Certainly being in Alexandria, Virginia, which is one of the most densely populated cities in America, had over 9,000 people per square mile. And you can do the math. Hardin, I don't know what this population per square mile is here, but it's much reduced from that. Same with Raleigh. And with that comes all these complications when you put a lot of people in a particular space. And so you become very dependent on things like mass transit, whatever that means. And up there it meant rail, and it meant bus, and it meant pedestrians and bike sharing and all these other things that we now will have to start looking at here. And, but there are also things that I think I bring from Seminole County, Florida, where a third of the county, the rural areas, were protected. And the people did that in Seminole County because they valued making sure that we have viable agricultural properties for the future so that we can grow things to help feed the people who live here. And these are things that need to be on the table and frankly are on the table for discussion in the future. And I was out in some of the rural properties east of here and had some great discussions with some of the farmers and ranchers, and we're well poised, I think, for the future. But that also means that how do we guide growth in these future times? And density isn't a bad thing if it's in the right place. And so Garner, of course, is poised really well from an economic standpoint and from its adjacencies to other locations. So I think, again, all these things are going to play on us. And we are going to have to all work together in moving these big topics forward so we can protect those things that we all know we need to protect in the future.
Thank you. Along those same lines, Richard, I'm going to direct this question first to you. What do you think will be the key to Wake County and the Garner area's continued success? How can we stay on top and not repeat the mistakes of other communities, not necessarily other communities in North Carolina, other communities in other states?
Well, think about what's happened to some other communities in other states in terms of too much growth too soon without adequate planning. I think that absolutely is the key, has always been the key, and that's taking a long-term view of the world, and in particular Wake County and the Garner area, which I think in many ways the county commission's doing, your board of here at the town does, and the business community does in concert with them. If you don't do that, you're destined, I think, to choke yourself with growth. And you can name the parts of the country that have done just that. And I think we've done a decent job in most areas. I was asked the question, Jim, when I left the job, what went wrong? What did you not do well? And the answer was transportation. Remember, the county has very little role in transportation. It's mainly a state and city responsibility. But our transportation structure then and now is not what it needs to be for a population of this size. And of course, we've got to always build schools. There's never going to be a stop to that as long as kids are coming here. And by the way, there used to be a time, Bill Fletcher might remember this, when a child was born, you knew they're going to go to school in 5 years, and you could predict. There was a formula called the cohort survival formula, and you could know almost to the child how many kids you're going to have in school in 5 years from now. If you're not growing, it's easy. If you're just growing from natural birth. But you could bring a company in here that has senior level people that brings in high school students, or a young staff that brings in elementary age kids, and you don't know from year to year what they are. And so trying to keep a handle on not only how many students, but what kinds of students at any given time is going to continue to be a challenge. But if we don't look out for those two issues, school growth and transportation issues, then we are destined to choke ourselves. When I think what we want to be is a continuously growing, vibrant, exciting place to be, and that's the way I think to get there.
Thank you. Joe, same question.
I think I agree with Richard. I think he's made great points there, and I think that we started back in 2002 or 3 with a growth management plan, having the local governments get together and talk about that. And one of the things that came up, you can't control growth. You can't do that. You can manage that and manage that in an effective and successful way, and I think we've done that. The challenge for us going forward is to continue to do that. And I'm going to quote David Cook. I said and one of the things he would say is that we don't want to mess up what we have to screw up their future, something along those lines. And so as Dave was very technical, as you should remember, but I think that's an important thing for us in making sure that we've got the appropriate infrastructure in place, that we're going to work with the school system, making sure that we meet those needs, and that we're going to, and again, our goal in transit is much more facilitative, and we don't provide that as a direct service. But that's the challenge for this area, and we don't want to be in Atlanta. I don't think anybody here wants for that to occur, but we have got, that's the thing that makes this area so attractive, is that we're not that. We're not in New York City. We're not in Washington, D.C. We're not in L.A., not even moving in that direction. But we need to be careful about making sure that we don't become that, and that we address those issues and concerns that are out there, and that we, again, our view has to be, and this is another thing from David, it's taken a long, and Richard said the same thing. You guys worked together, didn't you? Yeah. So that is taking the long-term view and doing things today that will have a definite, significant, beneficial impact for us in the future. So long-term planning, I think, is the key for this area.
Thank you. Jim, is there anything you'd like to add to that question?
No, I think, again, after this first 20 minutes or so, you do see the theme, and you do see what I think we're all saying is important, and the past work informs the future work, and these are things that are really important for our future. And it's very good. We are moving ahead with transit planning. Although the county doesn't provide transit services, the board has a decision on funding to make at some point in time. We need to really understand our transit potential and the environment which we work now, and that extends beyond our borders as well. So it's going to be complicated. We've got all the transit partners at the table. We're in the process of hiring a consultant right now. We're going to go into a fairly aggressive time frame for some planning, and there'll be some engagement pieces with the community, and of course, lots of feedback publicly with elected officials in order to make sure that we're staying on the right courses here so that we can develop very good information, because with good information, you get great decisions. All right, and those have to go together. And I think we're doing that similarly with the school system. The superintendent and I are committed, and I think our boards are challenging us to work on future modeling and understand what it's going to take to continue to provide great schools in the future. And these are two big cost drivers as well. And if we get this right, maybe we can get a little bit more predictability into the system and understand that we are building a public education structure and a Wake Tech structure as well that becomes very important for the future, because the kind of folks we take through our school systems then become employed in our community, and growing our own is very, very important, and we want these young folks to stay here. And so it also becomes very attractive to other employers who may want to bring new jobs or expand in this community, and that has a direct correlation to economic development. And so bringing in businesses means bringing in hotels, means bringing in other types of infrastructure that will actually be very good for our ability to continue to provide for quality of life. So it all works hand in hand. All of this is very interrelated.
Thank you. Hear, hear, by the way. More jobs and investment. Senator Stevens, transit has been important to Garner for a long time. Can you provide an update on transit from a legislative perspective?
I think it was Mark Twain that said your life and property aren't safe when the General Assembly is in session. Well, they're still in session, folks. In fact, I'll be there tonight with them. Maybe they'll wrap it up tonight. But there are a couple of issues on their plate that could have a dramatic impact, and they've already done one that will have an impact on several pieces. There was an election reform bill passed just a few days ago and signed by the governor that on the surface sounded very positive, and certainly the majority of the General Assembly has been saying for years, when you have a bond election, when you have a special election, you should do it at a time when the most number of people are voting. You should do it at the time of a general election, as opposed to a standalone date for a bond election. Good logic. Had that law been in place in 2013, Wake County would not have had a bond election in 2013 for schools, because there was not a county-wide election in 2013. Instead, it happened the same time as the municipal election, when most people in the county were voting, but not everybody in the county had a chance to vote. New law goes into effect, is in effect now. There will not be able to be a county-wide vote in Wake County on anything of a special nature, whether it's a transit referendum, a school tax referendum, a school bond referendum, any other kind of bond referendum, except an even number of years. So the earliest there can be any of those issues now will be 2016. The school board normally would have been in 15, the time's gone past, but that's been moved to 2016. So there's no countywide election next year, and so there will be no bond, no special election in Wake County or anywhere else in North Carolina in 2016. So that's the first issue. We got some time to deal with this, and that may be good. That gives time for good, solid planning. Had the school bond happened that way, it would have been a year of delay. But in this case, it may give you some time for good planning. There's a second bill that didn't pass, but again, it's not over yet, and that would do some fairly dramatic things in Wake County, and we seem to have been singled out somewhat by that piece of legislation. And again, that was part of an overall plan to cap the amount of local sales tax you can have in North Carolina. Why? Because the General Assembly has a long-range plan, the current General Assembly has a long-range plan of expanding the sales tax base to include more things and lower the income tax rate. And if that happens, you would pay tax on services, attorney, accountant, real estate appraisals, et cetera, but you wouldn't pay as much income tax. And the goal was to limit the amount that local governments, cities and counties can tax, so they don't have a windfall from that broadened base, since the cities and counties don't benefit at all from the income tax structure. The impact for that for Wake County would be, Wake County already has a 2% local sales tax. The most then Wake County could add would be 0.5%. Currently, Wake County is authorized to go to 2 3/4 cents. That may sound like a nit, but 1/4 cent of sales tax in Wake County is what, $35 million?
About $28 million.
$28 million. 1/4 cent makes $28 million per year, every year, for whatever the need might be, whether it's schools or parks or libraries or infrastructure or transit or whatever. So that legislation is still in limbo. It's bottled up right now in the House Rules Committee. It could pop out tonight and get adopted. It may come back in November when the General Assembly will come back for what should be a session about Medicaid, or it very certainly may come back in the long session in 2015. So there's some unknowns about that. Now, some other things did happen. Governor McCrory and Secretary Tata were very successful in getting a reform bill through the General Assembly in 2013 on transportation. Heretofore, transportation funding in North Carolina was under what was called the equity formula, which means all parts of the state got pretty much equal money. Well, that made no sense, frankly, because not all parts of the state have the same road needs and transportation and transit needs. And so the new formula is based on, guess what? Need. If you've got greater traffic, if you've got greater issues or infrastructure problems, you get more money on the new formula. So Wake County and this area will gain from that new formula, and transit is a part of that. So that's a down the road issue, but at least it's changed significantly the way the dollars are allocated. But there's some positive moves, but there's some unknowns at this point about what may happen in the future.
Thank you very much. I have a few more questions, but I thought that I would go to the audience now and see if there are questions from you all. So if you've got a question, please stand up and speak loudly so we can hear you. Questions? Well, you all are just answering all their questions ahead of time.
There you go.
Oh, is there one? Oh, there you are. I didn't even see you. You're blending in. Hi, please. I turned at the wrong time.
I'd like to know how you're weighing the difference between buses and trains for transportation. My personal opinion is buses don't always, let's leave it your opinion, buses versus trains.
My answer is both. My answer is both. In the short range, I think clearly, and this is personal opinion now, personal opinion is that short range, buses is the way to go to expand the current busing system. Longer range is to do some commuter rail, and longer range is probably light rail. Now, what that means in terms of when, I don't know. Is it 10 years, is it 20 years, is it 30 years? It's sometime in the future. If the growth continues, we're 1 million now. We used to be at 300,000. You know, we've grown again that much more, and we're going to continue to grow. You're going to have some alternatives. The cost of building roads, if you could find a place to build the roads, just doesn't exist, and the cost to do them. So I think you got to do it over a period of time, graduated from buses to commuter rail to light rail. That's my personal opinion.
And I think that is precisely part of the study that we're undertaking right now, is to quantify that and then to put really good numbers to it. Rail is much more expensive than buses. Buses can be more flexible in their routing and so forth, but I will tell you that people like to ride trains more than they like to ride buses. We've got a great rail corridor spine going from here to Durham. The town manager and I were discussing that one day, and he showed me the terminus at one end, and we talked about the viability of that, and I know it's been studied, and it will need to be studied even more. And then it's also about the complexity of running some sort of commuter rail on the same tracks with freight. All right, and those are sometimes very difficult. Ownership of the corridor is favorable right now. The size of the right-of-way is favorable. It's right for studying, and I think once we have identified the types of rail, then we can see, how much is it going to cost us, and those numbers can be very staggering. And therefore, in the past, you see a lot of communities that got major federal help in order to do that. So we have to be very strategic about that. In the meantime, we operate a number of bus systems throughout the communities. We've got all the transit partners at the same place. So we have to have some good discussions about who runs buses where, and not only buses, but other things. They don't all have to be, you know, the big buses. They can be smaller and more specific. So transit and rail are evolving throughout the country. We need to know the real cost of all this so that, again, we make great decisions about that.
And let me add this, I should have said it when I did, and I hope I'm, Mayor, not going to use one of your terms, but I don't want to be a broken record. Is that one of your terms?
He didn't say that one. You're okay.
But I think the key again is planning. You don't wait 20 years and say, oops, now we need to do something about transportation. Let's do it today. You plan it ahead. You don't just start tomorrow or a given day and say, okay, open the trains today. You've got to plan. You've got to site the stations. You've got to get the right of way. You've got to get the agreements in place, which are not easy with railroads. I assure you, I've dealt with railroads. And do it way ahead of time and not wait until the last minute. Which I think is what the county commissioners and the manager are doing with their planning process, is to get the consultant on board and say, okay, it's time to tweak our plan and make that plan nimble. Plans change as issues change and times change. Make it nimble so as the situation changes, you can adapt to the situation, but you've got your backbone and your structure in place.
Thank you. Other questions from the audience? I don't want to miss anybody. Okay, I've got another question for you all. During your tenure at Wake County, what were you most proud of? And I know two of you are still there, but in a different role, Joe, than you were as the interim manager. And then for you, Jim, and I guess Joe too, looking out 20 to 30 years, what are you most excited about? So we'll start, I think, with Richard and then work our way down.
Hard at my age to think about 30 years out, but I hope to be kicking then and still living in Wake County. But certainly in the last 30 years, I'm very proud to have been a part of it and to have worked for very different, diverse county commissioners. I worked for Republicans, I worked for Democrats, I worked for both. But to a person, they were dedicated to find local quality government services. I was very proud of the infrastructure and the planning that we put in place, whether it was a master plan for parks or the master plan for libraries or the master plan for health and human services or the master plan for EMS, et cetera. To be able to, again, be a part of a process that thinks ahead and looks at the community holistically and long-term. This is a partnership. You're one community of 12, but a very vibrant and important part of that 12, but you've got partners to work with as well. And I was very proud of the partnership. Hardin and his predecessors and I used to meet together once a month religiously to talk about issues that affected all of Wake County, and I think you all still do that. And that's very important to have those kind of dialogues. But mostly I was proud of the county team that came together. I think probably most of whom are retired by now, Joe and Jim. But their successors, some of, are very dedicated professionals, dedicated to doing quality work for you, sometimes under difficult challenges. Some of you were here in 1996 with Hurricane Fran, and if you had known what your county staff did during that hurricane period aftermath, you would be amazed. When a young man was there working every day and his personal home and car were destroyed by the storm, but he was at work serving you. So the kind of dedicated professionals that serve you every day. As a citizen, I'm very proud of. When I was manager, I was very proud to be a partner with them, but certainly looking at them now and the quality of people that are there. And the results, absolutely the results. I'll put this place against anywhere. We can attract someone of Jim Hartman's quality because of who we are and what we have here in Wake County. Some of it's natural, some of it's because of where we are, and I was 10 minutes away to my office in downtown Raleigh to get here, and that's part of your asset in the Garner area of being close to everything. But just to be part of it is something I'm extremely proud of.
Thank you. Jeff?
And along those same lines, I think, and I always like to give credit to staff, what you see up here in these three of us are the faces of Wake County. There are thousands, probably 3,468, something like that are employees in Wake County that do an absolutely great job 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And I'm most proud of the work that they do and the mentoring that I have done in helping to develop staff. And I think that's been good, and then that will pay dividends for us moving forward. I'm also proud of again, growth comes back up again, having been involved with the Growth Management Task Force that was done back in the early 2000s, I think that had a significant success for us to at least get together and plan, create those partnerships, and talking about what Wake County and the cities and towns will look like in the future. Also, the open space program. It is very, very unique, not just in North Carolina, but in the nation as a whole. The things we've done there started out working with water quality to preserve water quality, but also moved over to partnering with the cities and towns in greenway development. So that I'm very, very proud of that. And then the exciting part for me is the buildings. You know, once all of us are gone, long gone, 50, 60, 70 years, those buildings will still be here. Very proud of the Justice Facilities Plan, building new jails, building the libraries. Very proud of the new Justice Center that we have. We just moved into that building last year. And a lot of that is associated with good financial and sound management principles in doing those. I think I'm, again, proud of the work that our staff has done and proud that those buildings are there. And those are not going to be concerns for somebody else. We've already got that taken care of. You got a facility in place. It's going to last 50, 60, 70 years. So that's good.
Thank you.
And
Jim?
I'll just add on that, you know, I think going forward and currently and in the past, we have enjoyed a AAA bond rating. And just to put that into perspective, we hosted, I guess it was last week or the week before, and time flies, the week before. We hosted representatives from Moody's, Standard & Poor's, and Fitch to come down to the community to go through our financial information, to take a tour. All the Board of Commissioners participated, representatives from the schools participated. We toured Roseville High School. We went to some open space. We looked at Wake Tech and had a presentation from Dr. Scott. I mean, it was really impressive. And they have all three reaffirmed our AAA bond rating. Now, we're about to issue $325 million in bonds to start that next groupings of school construction and some libraries. And these are things that are very important to the community. And having a AAA is going to save us millions of dollars along the way, because they also rate not only that debt, but our past debt, and reaffirm that we are a healthy choice for investment. And I believe we are one of 38 or 39 counties in America to enjoy that AAA. So that says a lot about the past in this county and how much that planning that Richard spoke about and the employees that Joe spoke about. And this is all about where we're going in the future. And it's a testimony to the strength that we have here as a community. And remember, when other corporations and so forth, when MetLife was looking at us, that somebody probably asked that question, well, how are the governments down there? Are they solvent? Do they have good financial reputation? Are we going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars and bring lots of employees to Wake County only to have something fail? And I think as they did their research, they came to the same conclusion that I came to. This is a great place to come to and live.
Thank you very much. I think it's clear that we have been exceedingly fortunate in the county managers that we've had. Richard, David, who's not with us today, Joe, and Jim. All county managers are not cut out of the same cloth, and we have been fortunate to have some of the best of the best. So please join me in rounding of applause. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.